Hi, I'm Deborah Ashheim, and I'm visiting with artist Bronwyn Mauldin, and we're going to take a look at some of her zines and find out more about her art and her activism.
Hi, I'm Bronwyn Mauldin. I am a writer and a zine maker. A few of my zines right here. I actually started making zines back in late 2016 in response to the election and the direction that I was concerned, really worried about how our democracy was going to be going. As I started talking to friends and who were worried about what was going to happen with the new president, I discovered that a lot of my friends had never actually been to a protest before. And to be honest, I was kind of surprised. I was like, what were you doing during the Bush years? I decided to create a zine. I actually taught a class, a workshop on it that was all about Protest 101. And I decided to make the zines because I was also feeling really deadened by what I was seeing happening on the internet and the role that social media had played in the election. And I really wanted to make things that had a physical presence, and I didn't want to be on the internet. I didn't want to be blogging. I didn't want to be tweeting. I wanted to make things. And so that's what I did. I made the zine. That has led to a whole series of zines about voter suppression, about how to testify before a government meeting, and of course, not most important one, but why we vote and how. This is a guide to how to vote. I've started a whole other series that is about the relationship between democracy and climate change, and other zines as well, including this little pocket guide for how to change the world. But so I created the zines and I started selling them in bookstores and at zine fests and through zine distributors, and never made them available online. I just wasn't interested. I did want to share with you a couple of key tools, that the zine makers tools that I have with me. This is the long arm stapler, which is a critical instrument for taking 8.5 by 11 paper, staple down the middle and fold. And of course, this beautiful typewriter, which is a manual typewriter, is always a wonderful tool to have as a writer.
Can we see inside one of the zines?
That's a great idea.
So they're really pamphlets. Like they were in a tradition with old school pamphlets that give people useful information that they can actually use in addition to being artist books. It's
totally like the one on how to testify has in the center fold is a fill in the blank. You go to testify before a public meeting, you could prepare your remarks right here so that you're ready to go when you show up.
And why is it important to you that they have this handmade physicality?
It's interesting because it really is in response to the way we behave on the internet. And it begins to make us, I feel like we become disembodied ourselves when we engage in the internet. And when you're literally physically holding an item in your hand and you're reading the pages and you can turn back and forth, and you're not in the constant scroll. You know, the way so much of the internet and the way it's designed is to keep you there, to keep you scrolling, to keep doing the same, that instead you have this finite physical thing and you come to the end and you can go back and you can look at it and look at the same things again and read them differently. And you can come back to them weeks later after maybe you learned something new and read them again and get something different out of them.
You were talking about the rise of activism in the wake of the bad thing that happened in 2016. But we're living in a moment right now, the past month and a half, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, of unprecedented, intersectional, multi-generational, international activism that I've never seen in my lifetime, that people are calling like justifiably a second civil rights era. How is your practice relating to that? Has that changed your mission or anything you're doing?
One of the things that I'm starting to make an effort to do in the circles that I'm part of, and I say this as a person who's both an artist and an arts administrator, and also a white person, is to talk about this as a civil rights movement. I think it's really important that we really articulate it that way so that people can understand that what's happening in the streets isn't scary. It's actually beautiful. This is people speaking truth to power. This is how change happens. So that is, intersecting with the work I do. But it's also, I think, the way we have to talk right now. I did this zine on voter suppression back in 2017. I'm actually going to work on a new one that really is even more how-to, and I'm hoping to do it like a how to prepare for election day, to give people really clear guidance, because the tactics that are being used for voter suppression have just been ratcheted up and are changing. And so new zine coming soon. The other thing I have started doing is making my zines available online. And that is in response to the fact that people can't go to bookstores as much now. And so I think what is most important is that the information be available. So if the internet is where if we are all living in virtual space right now, as we are, then I think making this available online is really important. And the last thing I want to say about my work, but also kind of my approach to the world is trying to stop thinking about the arts world as a zero-sum game. This idea that if your book is published, then mine might not be. If you get the grant, I won't. And that's really dangerous thinking, especially in a time like this. And so I'm an arts administrator by day, and part of my job gets to be thinking about how do we make more resources, more opportunities available to more artists, and encouraging artists, and for myself to work with other artists, like with Artists for Democracy, in thinking about what is it that our art is intended to do in the world, and making that happen and collaborating in ways that can happen.
That's great. All right. So one other thing I want to ask you is, you talk a little bit about art not being a zero-sum game, and I got a feeling from what you're saying that you're kind of envisioning a different kind of artistic community that's not based on competition, the way that maybe is the gallery and art school model. Do you feel like there's opportunities in this moment, and how do you hope art might be transformed by either the way that things are restructured in our society as a result of the pandemic, or the big rethinking of society and privilege and the structures that a lot of the power structures that it's based on in this moment?
I probably know the publishing world best, and it's been interesting the last couple of years in publishing. You've seen this enormous boom in independent. It's been a golden age of independent presses and small presses and self-published writers. But those folks still, they don't sell in the numbers that a book published by a large publishing house based in New York does. The future that I hope to see is one where all of those voices are heard, where there are platforms where people can share, and where if we as artists can collaborate and cooperate more effectively, and not just within disciplines, but like visual artists like you and writers like me, and figuring out how do we support each other and how do we help each other build our audiences. What I'd love to see in the future is artists who've been shut out, either by the structures of the system or by the way they've been told not to believe in themselves and their artworks, are seen and heard more. Their work is seen and heard more. And I also hope we see simply more art. I think that the slowdown in time and activity that's happened during the pandemic is an opportunity for us to think about how do we, if I can't go to the ball game, maybe I'll see some art, I'll experience some art. Maybe more people have more time to make the art they've dreamed of. And I hope they feel encouraged to do that. The other thing I really would love to see is new tastemakers in art. New people deciding what is art. New visions of what art can and can't be. And specifically looking more art that we see a rise in more art that is more reflective and intentional about power. I want to read to you a quote from Toni Morrison that I ran across while I was making this zine. It's just so powerful. She says, "All good art is political. There is none that isn't. And the ones that try hard not to be political are political by saying, we love the status quo. We've just dirtied the word politics, made it sound like it's unpatriotic or something." So thinking about, I want to see more art that addresses that question of politics and power and who gets to make those decisions.
That's great. Thank you so much.
All right.